You can see one another, but it also shows those joining us. So welcome everybody, Det Yehuds. Welcome to the monthly seminar series, Understand a Place for Knowledge Exchange. The theme for this month is Understanding is a Practice, Listening Across Cultures. And we have a wonderful group of panelists joining us, special guests joining us. And we're excited to have all of you here. Go ahead. We have just a couple slides to go through, and I'm just doing the intro, and I'll hand it off to Arlo here in a minute. So this is co-hosted by the College of Indigenous Studies and International Arctic Research Center. Sorry, that's not updated. And then collaborative. So our theme is collaborative approaches to research, education, and real-life community-based practices in rural Alaska. This is our second one so far this semester. And we have another planned for next month. So be looking for those. Also, I wanted to note that if you already signed up and registered, you're registered for the future ones also. So those should be populating on your calendar as we set the dates. Our facilitators, Josie Sam is in attendance, Arlo, who's going to be facilitating this wonderful seminar today, and myself. Thank you for joining us for lunch. I wanted to do the land acknowledgement. Everywhere we live and work is native lands. We recognize, appreciate, and honor our Indigenous peoples and their past, present, and future land stewardship. We're committed to building long-term reciprocal relationships with Indigenous organizations and knowledge holders to create relevant and actionable information in support of their sovereignty and self-determination. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Arlo. I don't know if you want me to keep this photo of our panelists up here while we do introductions, or what would be most helpful.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Arlo Davis. Work here at IARC, International Arctic Research Center. And this month's episode of our shared speaker series between College of Indigenous Studies and IARC is we are having a panel discussion. So we're going to spend about half an hour listening in on this moderated conversation between our three guests this month, and then we'll spend the last half of the hour opening it up for discussion with the whole audience and our panelists. And thank you everyone for coming. Our three panelists are Lenora Carpluk, she goes by Lolly, and Sharon Dayton, and Julie Raymond-Yakoubian. And I'll turn it over to, so let's see, we're gonna let's do a real brief introduction from each of you, and then we'll open it up to Sharon to go first. Well, yeah, Sharon, you want to do your introduction, and then Julie, and then Lolly, and then we'll just see where that conversation, where those introductions take us for the conversation.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. I am Alaskan and Inuit from Caltech. We're the last Yukon stop on the Iditarod Trail before they hit the coast. And both of my parents were adopted, so I have a huge family along the Yukon, Kuigpak, and I think all the rivers in Alaska. So the whole interior, chances are I'm related to them in one way or another.
And Julie, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Did you freeze, Sharon? Okay.
No.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to check because my my screen did freeze for a second. I got one of those your internet is unstable messages. Great. I just wanted to make sure you were done. Yes, it's really nice to be here with Sharon and Lolly, esteemed colleagues. My name is Julie Raymond-Yakoubian. I grew up on the East Coast of the United States, where most of my blood family still lives. My parents are Joan and David, a nurse and an IT guy. And my family background is Irish and Polish and some other Northern European places. I moved to Alaska about 30 years ago to go to school and have lived in lots of different places around Alaska. I currently live in Girdwood, and before that, I lived in Nome for about 9 years. I work as the social science program director for Cuunic'uar, and many of you may know, but Cuunic'uar is the Alaska Native nonprofit tribal consortium created by and for the 20 tribes of the Bering Strait region. And I've been working for Cuunic'uar and tribes of the region for over 18 years now as an anthropologist and the social science program director. And our work in the social science program consists of several things, but it's primarily a balance between doing collaborative research with region tribes and then also doing policy and advocacy work based on that research. And Cuunic'uar has been very involved in discussions around research methods and research ethics and advocating for the processes and procedures that our tribes want to see used in our part of Alaska. So very, very happy to be here with everyone today.
Oyana, Sharon and Julie. Introducing myself, Huaqa, as a Yupik person in Alaska's interior in Dene country. I am a guest as a Yupik person. I'm grateful to the elders and educators and community for their acceptance and friendship and continual guidance in all the years I've lived in Fairbanks. I would like to thank the College of Indigenous Studies and International Arctic Research Center, also known as IARC, for inviting me to be part of the conversation today. I'd like to do a brief introduction of myself, first in Yugtun, then a English translation. Kuigpak miunga azajaqyaqmak atjaqalugauga angay qahka Cuunic'uar Johnny and Yungersaq Marianne Sheppard azajaqyaqmak my Fairbanks Sami Wita Lachtor. I am from the Kuigpak area, and Kuigpak translates to the Big River. It's also known as the Yukon River, more specifically the Lower Yukon, from Azajaqyaq Mountain Village. My parents are the late Cuunic'uar Johnny and Yungersaq Marianne Sheppard of Azajaqyaq. I currently live in Fairbanks. So I had asked Arlo and the panel if we could have a map showing the language map of Alaska, and the Yupik Jupik region covers an area starting from the Stebbins and St. Michael, and there's also some Yupik speaking communities along the Norton Sound north of Stebbins and St. Michael. So Stebbins, St. Michael along the Norton Sound down to the Lower Yukon region, where I'm from, along the Bering Sea coast, Scam and Hooper Bay, Chivak, across over to the Kuskokwim River and Kuskokwim Bay, and down to the vast region of the Bristol Bay region. It is an expansive region with many dialects in the Yupik region, covering all those areas, diverse geographic regions, and unique histories of how each Yupik Jupik community was established. As my Yupik elders have demonstrated, I am from a specific part of the Yupik Jupik region. I am sharing from what I have learned and continue to learn from my own experience. We never stop learning. Koyana to each of you for all the work that you do, for all of you that have joined us today. And this is, I haven't met Julie in person, but I briefly met Sharon. So we're meeting each other for the first time over this planning session before this webinar. Koyana.
Yeah, we've had a few planning sessions, and for a while, I was thinking each of you would get 8.33 minutes each to talk about your own distinct thing, but then we realized, no, we should just make this a conversation for about half an hour between the three of you, and then open it up for general discussion and Q&A with the audience. I guess to start off with, Julie, the Cuunic'uar research protocols that have been gaining uh, awareness across academia for ever since they came out. Maybe you could just mention that first, and then maybe Sharon and Lolly, maybe that'll spark something.
Yeah, thank you, Arlo, and thank you, Santa, for putting a link in the chat there. So Kuunic'uar, in collaboration with the 20 tribes across the region, spent several years working to pull together tribal research protocols for our region. And we did that for a number of different reasons. Over the past 10 years or so, the Bering Strait region, as well as other parts of Alaska, but the Bering Strait in particular, I think, has experienced what we have been calling a tsunami of research. Just more and more research and more funding being poured into research focused on the Bering Strait region and climate change, changing marine conditions, fisheries research, pretty much everything you can imagine. And that was creating a lot of stress and strain on our communities, as well as Cuunic'uar as a regional tribal organization. And we were seeing a lot of behaviors and approaches that were not tribally based and tribally focused, and which were not serving the tribes of our region. And that's not a new thing, that the history of research in Alaska and the history of research with Indigenous communities is, littered with bad experiences and bad behaviors on the part of researchers. And so based on that long history, as well as what we were experiencing in the moment, tribes determined that we need to put out there into the world what it is we want to see, how we want to be engaged with, how we want to be treated, how we would like research to be conducted. And so Cuunic'uar spent several years working with every tribe in the region individually and collectively to both hear their experiences in the past and how those could translate into what they would like to see in the future, as well as coming up with very specific protocols and practices that people wanted to be engaged through. And that built off of some other work that we had done on things like co-developing a framework for co-production of knowledge in Arctic research with some other allies of Cuunic'uar. And really, now we're in the process of trying to get these protocols out into the world, out into the hands of researchers and research institutions, so that people are very clear about the most culturally appropriate and effective and beneficial ways to interact with tribes in our region. And so it's out there. I hope you will all take a look at it if you haven't seen it before. A lot of it is, very specific to Bering Strait region because it's coming directly from tribes in our region, but I think is also widely applicable across communities. And so we really think there's a lot to learn there that can really improve the way that the research community at large interacts with communities in our region specifically. And when I say the research community at large, I don't say that to exclude Alaska Native communities, because the Alaska Native community, tribes, tribal communities are part of the research community, but this document is more outward focused to people who may want to partner with and work with tribes in our region. Thanks for the chance to talk about those, Arlo.
Thank you, Julie. I really, really wish this was available when I was doing my research. So I did a qualitative study in 2009 and 10, and I searched everywhere that I could look for methodology for Alaskan Indigenous groups, and there wasn't much. I had started looking at research that was done in Canada, research with the Indigenous in Australia, and then research with our lower 48 brothers and sisters. And I took all of that into consideration, but then I decided to rely on my cultural values, the Athabascan values that were instilled in me as a child. And while a lot of that is inward facing between tribes and within our families, some of it, well, a lot of it can be outward facing, such as respect for elders, respect for others, respect for knowledge, the land and nature. We value wisdom from life experience. We are honest, be uniting, be fair, show you care, and share with others. So I really took that into heart as I created the methodology for my research. And the first thing I did was to show respect for the tribal authority from the Caltech tribe. So I wrote them a letter. I explained what I was doing. I explained my research question. What do we believe around death and dying? And I shared everything with them. I was completely transparent. I shared all of the documentation that I was giving to the participants, the questions that I was going to use. And then because it was such a difficult and delicate topic, I garnered the support of a behavioral health specialist, and she had her master's in clinical psychology. And so I asked her for help to run the focus groups. And when I set up the focus groups, I set it up under something that Caltech people were already comfortable with, and that was the talking circle model. And so we sat in a circle. Men were in their own group, women in their own group, because of the different roles they play when someone passes away in the village. And it was important for me to just be quiet and humble in the background. I gave complete control over to the moderator, and she knew exactly when to take a break because it was getting very emotional, recalling difficult memories and such. And so I approached the whole thing from I did the individual interviews with elders. From my upbringing, I knew it was disrespectful to make direct eye contact, especially with elders, especially when talking about a difficult subject. And since I interviewed a range of ages from 40s into their 80s, I decided it would be best for me to mirror their body language. So if I was talking with someone and they faced me and looked directly at me, I did the same. The elders tended to sit at an angle facing away from me and looking in a different direction. And so I respected their space and I did the same. It was very successful. A lot of the participants thanked me. They were happy that I was doing this study. And I did have one elder be very angry with me and publicly berate me, which would have been very disrespectful for me to answer back. So I just let him speak. And that was part of my process, is approaching it with complete respect and humility. And I'm glad I did it. And I really did wish I had the stuff from Cuunic'uar before I did my project. It would have helped so much.
Oyana, I wanted to thank both Sharon and Julie. So looking at it from an Indigenous perspective as a researcher, you know, with Sharon's approach is, valuable coming from our own perspective. And then with Julie, with the tribal research protocols for Kuunic'uar region, just recently having come into my knowledge. And I think, if I remember, they were published in 2016. I mean, this is really critical work. Yeah, I think you mentioned over 20 communities, and in the acknowledgments, there's a lot of collaboration with different entities, and you mentioned all their names, and I mean, that's huge to get everyone on the same page. And I don't know how many regions of Alaska have Indigenous research protocols for their region. So I bring up that as a question, besides from Cork. But if you could uh, share, Julie, how many communities and how many other entities collaborated?
Yeah, thanks, Lolly. They were published in 2024, and all 20 tribes in the Kuunic'uar region contributed to them. We also had many um, colleagues from other organizations that contributed feedback to them or reviewed different versions just to see how they were uh, being interpreted and landing in the research community outside of our tribal communities. Hundreds of people were involved in these from start to finish over the course of a several year process. And after we got them into their kind of final format and all the tribes had approved of them, they went to Kuunic'uar's board of directors. And Kuunic'uar's board is comprised of the presidents of the 20 tribes in our region or their designees, plus our tribal health corporation and 2 elder representatives. So the entire Kuunic'uar board then reviewed and approved the protocols as well. And so it really truly was a region-wide effort to get these out into the world, and many, many hands and eyes were part of these as well. The most important hands and eyes were those of the tribal councils across our region.
Oyana.
Lolly, you're in this unique position of being in the middle of working on your PhD. Sharon talked a bit about her work on her master's degree, and Julie, we've been talking about these research protocols, which from what everybody that I've heard from and talked with from different regions outside of Kuunic'uar, we all recognize them as translatable to any region in Alaska. But I wonder how's it going working on your PhD, basically, like, because it's tricky. The PhD stuff is following university way, but we come from places where there's different rules to follow. And you're right in the middle of it.
Oyana, Arlo, there's so much to share, and maybe I could introduce it this way is the reason I decided to research Indigenous-based teacher education models while I was taking care of my late husband in 2014. In that area, I resigned from the university then and had been working in teacher ed. So I was taking care of my late husband, and students from my region, their parents would call me and they'd come and visit, and we'd have moose soup or fish, so they, in September, the freshmen shared that they were majoring in education. And so they would come every month and we'd have, just natural discussions on teaching. And then in May, they shared that they were switching their major to rural development. And I asked why. And so they gave me their reasons, and I encouraged them to do good work, whichever field they were going into. And then after they left, so your other half, my husband has been in, helping me in getting a better understanding of not only the English language, but the Western worldview. And so he encouraged me to go into research and study appropriate models for preparing Indigenous teachers. And so I've had this responsibility. I didn't want students to, experience what I experienced, or those students to continue to experience. And so I've in the PhD journey, I've pretty much answered some of the questions I had, but it's good to hear the way it's modeled, to hear from other people involved in how they're supporting Alaska Native teacher candidates. And I use the term Alaska Native because, it's statewide. Our teacher preparation programs are at the universities, APU. It's a 2-part process with certification at the School of Ed. So that's, a perspective. And then the hard part is we're coming from, as Indigenous researchers, from our own Indigenous perspective. And it came, one epiphany was during the November webinar where we were invited to participate here on campus. And that was my first time being part of the knowledge exchange. And listening to the discussions, it was a mix of faculty, university faculty, staff, master's and PhD students. And then towards the end, we hear most of the expectations from the university expressed. And then we're having our students who have interests in collaborating with rural communities, as Julie was sharing. And so the epiphany was, it, but when our students, wherever they come from, if they're not familiar with our region or aren't from the village, they're coming from a university with the specific expectations to get their degree, and then the worldview. And then when they come into our communities, there's a shift that's got to happen, because our people, and I should say for, specifically for since I'm from my home, Tlumyo, we don't control. Tlumyo is the creator. We don't control the weather. We don't control anything. So we adapt and adjust with nature and Tlumyo in control. That's a different perspective than what our university students are, coming into a community with. So I shared that, and then it brought us to this point. So I was looking at, it takes time to understand another cultural perspective. So our students are gonna, have to take time to, get immersed with other Alaska Native cultural groups before they go into a particular region. And then with the specifics under the Kuunic'uar tribal research protocols, those are, I would highly encourage students to read those and follow those.
Yeah. There's so much to talk about. Like, we're barely even just scratching the surface in this hour-long webinar. Oh, so many different directions to go. Yeah.
If I could just add one thing that, I I share with what I learned from observing my parents over their 25-year or more. They were state of Alaska employees. My mom at the school district at home as a cook, and my dad maintaining the airport at Mountain Village. And in that 25 to 30-year span of time, they met new teachers, they met new principals, superintendents, and I don't know how many there were. And over the years, they adopted, some teachers and principals and superintendents. And I shared this story in our planning committee about how I observed, my parents working with them, and the people, the non-native teachers that that wanted to work with my parents. They really listened, not just, thinking of getting ready to answer, but really listened. And there's a certain way to observe. You observe everything, not only what you're hearing, but the body language, the whatever they're looking at, or, in making reference to. There's, like in the English language, there's nuances, multiple meanings that are not shared in verbal or nonverbal. And that takes 10, 15 or more years to understand another cultural group, as I observed my parents working with these new teachers. And then the reciprocity, where these new teachers, one specific area, when they learned how to cut fish from my parents, how to, get prepared to get the fish, go fishing, do the fish processing to get them ready for the smokehouse, and then the final product. 15 years later, one of the teachers gifted my parents the salmon that they made. So that follows, the reciprocity process that's nonverbal in our communities. So I was really grateful that my parents modeled that way of working with people from different cultural groups, and how those teachers and superintendents, principals reciprocated because they understood. So I thought I'd share that modeling that my parents did.
I think that relationship development that you're talking about, Lolly, is just so important to building trust and respect between people just in general in life, but we're talking more specifically about research here. And so being open to listening to people, to understanding what they're telling you, what their life is like, being willing to try new things, all of those are really important and are part of something else I think we touched on in some of our planning discussions, which is the necessity for people to do their homework. And that kind of comes before the relationship part even, and making sure that you understand as much as you possibly can about the history and culture and values of a community before you just show up there and try and start working with people, to like really learn as much as you can, put in, and that shows that you're putting in the effort. People will notice that, they will appreciate that, and it's really important to do. So you're also not placing a burden on those communities to have to educate you, like on everything from a 101 perspective about their community. So doing the homework and building the relationships is really important. And just one other quick thing, I noticed that one of our guests here today is Adelheid Herman, and she has a wonderful set of resources that I'm going to put in the chat if I can here. And I had them up on my screen already because I had shared them with someone else yesterday. But these resources that Adelheid has put together about what the tribal landscape looks like, I think is a really important part of doing your homework. If you have never worked with a tribal government before, you need to learn what governance looks like in tribal communities. And it can look different in every community, but it also looks kind of similarly in different regions. So anyway, those are great resources that I wanted to make sure I stuck out there for people too.
Awesome.
Thank you both for sharing. Oops, sorry, Arlo. I wanted to add from the cultural perspective that it is important to keep an open mind, and like Julie said, do your homework. And like how Lolly explained that you go there to understand, to really listen. And so often, we get very highly educated people come to our village and, they mean well. And I don't think there's nefarious reasons for some of the research, but the way you approach people, people will listen to your body language. They'll listen to the way you talk to them. And I could tell, like, within seconds if someone is not interested in hearing what I have to say. And I will never be rude about it. I will just get quiet and quit paying attention to you. And so, and that's how I was raised. We're never going to be rude right to your face. And I think understanding, because I've also lived in different regions of Alaska. I lived 15 years on the North Slope. I had to adjust to them and they had to adjust to me. But I've learned to pay attention to my body language. I've learned to at least understand a little bit about who I'm speaking to. And when I'm speaking to, like, I've done these sessions with rooms full of doctors and medical doctors and PhDs and social workers and nurses. Understanding who you're speaking to, I will never speak the same way to a doctor as I would to an elder. And it's my way of showing respect by meeting people where they're at. And I think that's the point that I want to drive home the most for me as a Indigenous person, is to do your homework and meet people where they're at and show respect and be ready and willing to listen. Thank you.
Yep. Let's start taking questions. I bet people got a lot of questions. Not even sure how to.
Yeah, I don't know if they have the ability to turn on their mic. I
Oh,
don't
darn.
know, but they could definitely use the Q&A at the bottom. Maybe they can.
Yeah, if they raise their hands, we can call on them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, there's some good questions. Such amazing insights from our speakers.
While we're waiting for questions, I could maybe add one other thing. And maybe just to be clear, should people go to the Q&A or to the chat, or do we only have access to the chat? I'm not
Either one
100%
or
sure.
both.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure.
Me neither.
But one thing that I was going to add was, again, something we talked about a few days ago, which is this idea of serving rather than helping. And I don't know how many early career researchers we might have on the webinar with us today, but this is something that I did not learn in my career until quite far in. It's not something that anyone ever raised to me. And I actually learned it through working with community members. And it wasn't phrased to me in exactly this way, but it's how I have since come to talk about it, which is the idea that as researchers, we're not here to help anyone. And using that framework of helping can actually be really detrimental to relationship building, because it creates a kind of hierarchy between the researcher and the community that you're working with, that you are the absolute expert, and people aren't going to be able to solve their problem without you. And even if you're not posing it that way, when you're coming in with this attitude of like, I'm here to help, I'm here to fix, people notice it and they can feel it, like Sharon said, through body language or through the way that you're responding or listening or not listening to people. And so I have found it very helpful in my work, to think about it as service as opposed to helping and fixing. And looking at it through the lens of service means that we're here together, working on something together. We're going to figure it out together. And I'm doing something that, your community wants, not something that I've just decided is important for you, something that you've decided is important for you and that you're, asking me to come in and collaborate with you on. So, service versus helping has been an important framework for me as I have grown in my career, to see that I am not there to fix people's problems. I should only be there if people want me to be there, is another part of that as well. So thought I would just throw that out, food for thought as well.
Hi, this is Eric Shane at IARC. Uh-oh. Got an echo on my end. Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Let's try that again. Oh.
It looks like you are signed in on two different devices. Sorry.
Oh, funny.
The second time you spoke, we just heard the one where there was no echo. So the second,
Yeah.
whatever you did the second time worked.
Okay, I'll try it again.
Yeah.
Funny. Okay, I'm going to mute again and see if there's a second instance open. I'll try to close that out.
Okay.
I'm not sure why I'm having echo. I'll just type it into the chat. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. There's another one from Katria. We can allow you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi, Lolly, Sharon, and Julie, and Arlo, thank you so much. I was wondering, so my name's Katria. I live in Fairbanks. I'm originally from California, but I've been really privileged to work in Kuigpak, at Gamble, St. Lawrence Island the past few years, and building relationships there and learning from subsistence hunters about how sea ice and weather has been changing. And in that time, I found it really, like, I do think that we have built some genuine relationships. And so in our work, often it does feel like, okay, this is a true conversation where we're truly listening to one another. But I think an area where I'm still learning and trying to figure out how to do a better job is in hosting larger meetings. For example, we do some meetings where we're speaking with individuals who we've been working with, and where it's really a dialogue. But then occasionally we want to do a larger share out to that's like a publicly facing meeting, saying, okay, here are some things we've all been working on, and we want that to be a dialogue. But I find that can be a bit more difficult in terms of figuring what is a structure that really that works for there to be, for everyone to be truly comfortable to share their own feedback as well. And I'm curious to hear from you all, what are some things that you found or experiences you've had that were effective in terms of larger group setting meetings that include people from different cultures, people from whether it's like local knowledge and academic researchers coming together. I would love to hear what your experience has been in terms of effective larger group meetings. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Katria. I can take a first stab at that. I would say a couple of things. One is, getting to know the region you're working in will help everybody understand like what modes of communication work best. So if you're working on Sivigak and you may have noticed that a lot of people listen to KNOM, and that's can be a great way to get out information is to ask for a little bit of time on the radio station to talk about your research. And it's not an interactive method, but it's one that reaches a lot of people, or a local regional newspaper as well. In Nome, we're also really lucky to have the Sea Grant program and their Straight Science Speaker Series, which again is a little bit less interactive, but there is an opportunity to ask questions and things like that. And it's a good way to potentially reach a lot of people with information about work that you're doing. But for interactive in-person kind of larger group meetings, we've found that sometimes it can be beneficial to have like a short presentation so everybody understands like what's going on and why we're all in the room together, but then to maybe have different stations that people can go to at their own, pace to hear from a member of the research team about a particular part of the work, or to see something visual that they can interact with and engage with, or maybe even a little exercise or game that people can play that's related to the research. So just giving people different ways to engage with your team, or a question you're asking, or information you're trying to share back, and being kind of creative about it that way, we found can be helpful in different scenarios. And also asking the community, like, how do you want to hear this information? What would be most useful and interesting to you as well? So those are just a couple things that we try and work with.
So if I'm to look at how Caltech does things, one of the things that is important is the cultural value of sharing. And so when I did my research, I brought food for the focus groups, and I looked for things that are not readily available in Caltech. And the people there were very happy to, they said, we didn't expect you to bring anything, but an elder did instruct me that I better bring something. And so I did. So sharing with the community is another way of opening doors to get more people to be involved.
Oriana, I had asked this question to Julie before. So it's a scenario, it hasn't actually happened, but let's say I wanted to work with individuals from one of the Cuunic'uar villages. So what would be my process? And I asked, do I write a letter to Cuunic'uar tribal organization, introducing myself, and then the specific, whether it's a village, tribal village council, tribal council, also introduce myself to them, that I wanted to work with particular individuals. And these individuals, let's say I've been working with them for the last 20, 30 years, and that they had already agreed to work with me, but I'm going through the process of being transparent to each level of the tribal research protocol in your region. And the other way that research is done is community-based, so that's a longer, larger process than I think if you're new to the area. So I thought I'd add those two trains of thought.
Great. I saw a question in the Q&A from Adelheid about how can researchers build more equitable budgets to include local people as part of their research projects? Are there new systems that need to be built, or do systems exist already? Thank you for asking that, Adelheid. A couple things I would say to that, and I'm sure Sharon and Lolly have a lot to say about it too. New systems definitely need to be built. There are some funders that are working to provide things like some of them are calling it like seed funding for researchers to be able to go out into a community to do some of this kind of planning work, including budgeting ahead of time. And that's beneficial. But I think there needs to be changes on multiple levels. One is at the level of, individual researchers or research teams, just recognizing the fact that people absolutely need to be compensated for their time. And people absolutely need to be part of the team as well, if that's what a community wants. A community may say, we don't need to be part of the team, but we, need these other things instead. So, it's really up to a community. So not to be a broad brush, but broadly speaking, communities need to be involved in research from the beginning, and that includes budgeting. And so researchers, I think, and more people are coming to this conclusion, researchers need to understand that that needs to be built into their budgets from the beginning. And those budgets are hopefully, like I said, being created alongside their tribal partners. Funding agencies also need to recognize that this is not just like a good thing to do now. It's a required thing. People must be compensated for their time. I worked on a NSF funded project recently where every community member that we were working with was getting paid the same as the PhD researchers that were working on the project because we decided that was fair, and that's what we did. And there was some pushback, but in the end, that's what happened with the project. So, making inroads into both our own ways of thinking about how research should be conducted, and getting our funders to recognize those things as well, and getting communities to be comfortable in demanding that from their research partners as well. And demanding sounds like kind of an aggressive way to say it, but in some cases, that's what's necessary, is for a tribe or community to say, if you want to work here, this is a requirement for us, whatever that is, that people get paid, X dollars an hour or this much for doing this particular kind of contribution or whatever it is. And that's a requirement. And if you can't meet that requirement, you're not going to be able to work with us on the thing. So communities having that confidence to assert their sovereignty and their rights in the realm of research, researchers complying with that and partnering on it, and funding agencies recognizing that like this is the way the world works now, as people are treated equitably across the board, I think are always where we can push that forward. And not all of those structures or systems are there. And I think as researchers, it's part of our responsibility to try and create those moving forward.
Julie, a lot of what you just said is really closely related to Eric's question he put in the Q&A box. Part of what I heard you just say, Julie, is we're still breaking trail on this stuff. And Eric's question is, I think it's kind of like, how do we break trail into that respectfully so that researchers aren't trying to assimilate TEK or validate TEK and vice versa? And it's a question, I think, for the whole panel.
I was just going to add to the comments, and I saw Eric's question. So using the words, English words, that's a concept within the Western worldview. The other half of it is, does that concept exist for myself as a Yupik person in the Yupik worldview? When we're teaching through the language, Yupik language and culture, we're not decolonizing, we're not indigenizing, we are Yupik. We are speaking the Yupik language and we are practicing the Yupik worldview. So there's a lot of really good work that's been published by Indigenous scholars statewide, nationally, and internationally around this very topic that Eric is raising. So, yeah, there's a lot of work out there by our Indigenous scholars.
I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but I don't see anyone else unmuted, so I'll just add on to what Lolly was saying. You know, I mentioned the co-production of knowledge framework that Cuunic'uar and ICC and Pew Charitable Trust co-created together, along with a lot of other allies and partners as well. And an important part of that framework is understanding that by bringing two knowledge systems together, and we'll just say, Western science and traditional knowledge, just generally speaking, bringing those two systems together can teach us something completely new about the world that we wouldn't necessarily have learned if we just took one or the other lens to look at a question or a problem or a scenario. And so that's the way I like to think about bringing knowledge systems together. There's a long history of Western science trying to validate or invalidate traditional knowledge coming from Indigenous communities, and that's really harmful. And it's not the right way to approach things. The systems of knowledge are not always going to align, and that's important. It's important to understand, where is that misalignment coming from? Why does Western science say apples and traditional knowledge is saying oranges? It doesn't mean that traditional knowledge is wrong. Maybe it's looking at a different aspect of the issue of fruit than Western science is. And let's, as a team, as a collaborative, equitable team based on trust and respect and reciprocity, let's break this down together and look at it from our respective knowledges and see what we can learn from that alignment or misalignment in things. So we don't really have time to kind of get into more specific examples than that, but I find that to be a useful lens to look at bringing different ways of thinking about the world together.
What I hear the panel saying is transparency. Do your homework and then ask for to start building a relationship with a tribal council or whatever it is. Start building relationship, and then I think what this panel is, what I'm hearing is, it's okay to not know. You can just start where you are, and as long as you're doing due diligence, and being open up front and saying, hey, this is what I was thinking. I don't know. What do you think? This is where I'm at.
When I think of people in my village, when they're getting to know someone, they ask a lot of questions. And when they're comfortable with you, they'll openly tease you. And seeing someone not get offended with the teasing, it's important, because people in my area won't tease you or chide you in any way if they didn't like you. And for looking at my own perspective, when I deal with people, when I'm comfortable around others, I speak openly. And if you want accurate research, you're going to be transparent. You're going to build that trust, and it has to be reciprocal. It has to be researchers also receiving. And so I think that's important to build that relationship as you're doing this. And you'll have to endure some long stories. You'll have to listen to hunting stories, and maybe they're not interesting to you, but listen anyways, because you're building a relationship. Thank you.
Man, it's 1 o'clock. We could talk all day. We could turn this stuff. This is like this kind of stuff that you just there's always more to talk about. So I want to thank all of our panelists and all of our guests and just encourage everybody to stay cool.
Thank you for organizing us to be here today. Thanks everybody who's been listening.
Brianna.
Yes, thank you, Lolly, Julie, and Sharon, and Arlo. Fantastic job with the moderation.
And thank you to Arlo, Josie, and Santa, and the other panelists as well.
I have another meeting right at 1, so I have to jump off.
Yep.
Thank you all, and have a good day. If you are in Fairbanks, stay safe, drive safely.